Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this white, black and green or Abzan colored high toughness deck where we're looking to deal a lot of damage with our high toughness creatures thanks to our commander. Doran, Besieged by Time, is a 4 mana 0/5 which now gives all our high toughness creatures a 1 mana discount, and whenever a creature we control attacks or blocks it gets +X until end of turn, where X is the difference between its power and toughness. So if Doran attacks, it will get +5/+5 until end of turn, so that can represent a lot of damage, and it could further be enhanced if we pair it with one of those many effects where a creature can deal damage equal to its toughness rather than its power, since those complement Doran's ability, where now if it attacks it could deal 10 damage as opposed to just 5. So then if we take a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few different categories, starting with mana acceleration, so we can get our commander in play ahead of schedule, and a lot of these ramp cards are also creatures with high toughness, so they can also deal a lot of damage once we get our Doran online. And then we've got even more high toughness creatures, and these range from 1-drops with 4 or 5 toughness, all the way to some more expensive creatures like Baitor, which also has additional abilities to draw extra cards and maybe even deal additional damage. And then the next category are all the effects we have to let us deal damage equal to toughness rather than power. As long as we have one of these in play, it can significantly enhance the amount of damage we deal. Then we've got some removal, a few spot removal spells, just the classics, as well as multiple board wipes that also have great synergy throughout, as they can often let us keep all our high toughness creatures in play, while often wiping the opponent's entire board. So these are another payoff for running all these high toughness creatures. Then we've got some card advantage, a few enchantments and creatures that can draw us additional cards. And then finally the miscellaneous section also has fun cards like Tower Defense to pump up our team, so we can increase their toughness before attacking and to deal even more damage. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration. Our Boreal Grazer can put an extra land in play, and as an 0/3 has pretty good synergy throughout. And then we've got our typical mana creatures that you'll see in many other decks: Avis's Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, Elvish Mystic, and Lanor Elves. And then Utopia Sprawl should also have enough forest that we can enchant. Then the Armored Scrapgorger in 0/3 can also double up as a Graveyard Hate. We've got the Fanatic of Aronas, can also be eternalized out of the graveyard. Can also maybe make 4 green mana, although it's a little harder to enable since we need to attack with Doran first to get the power boost, and then in our second main phase it can maybe tap for quadruple green. Then we also have a few sorceries to put extra lanes in play. Farseek, Shared Roots, and Rampant Growth at least are a little bit more difficult for the opponent to interact with than, let's say, an Arcane Signet, which is an artifact that can easily be destroyed, but it can immediately tap for a mana of any color. And then we've got some more high toughness mana creatures like the Great Forest Druid, 2 mana 0/4, and Overgrown Zealot, very similar. So these can attack for 4 damage with Doran in play, maybe even 8 damage if we also have one of those effects that lets us deal damage equal to toughness rather than power. Then there's the UFO, can also maybe tap to put an extra land in play, but having an 0/4 flyer is huge in this deck. And then Cultivate also makes the cut alongside the new Bovine 0/4 flyer that can tap for 2 mana of any one color, also good enough here. Keep in mind, we're not playing any creatures with a Defender ability, since even though we have a few effects in the deck that might enable those to attack, for the most part we don't want to count on those in play, so instead we have mostly high toughness creatures that don't have Defender, but still have a good toughness to power ratio, such as the Armadillo with Ward 1, the Trailblazer, we're not going to enable Heroic, just a 1 mana 0/4, same with the Yoked Ox and the Ancestor. We've got the Turtle Duck, this one we might activate to give it power 4 and trample until end of turn. Giant Ox at 2 mana and 0/6. There's a Nyx Fleece Ram, 0/5 can gain a life. Proctor can also shut down enter the battlefield abilities, of which we don't have many in our own deck, so it's mostly going to affect the opponent, and that can make a pretty big difference in some matchups. Same with the Honor Guard. Then Voice of Victory can shut down opposing instants during our turn. And then a Sorin, a 1/4 lifelinker, so can get one nice attack in for 4 lifelink damage, at which point we can transform it. There's a Soulless Jailer, another 0/4 that can maybe affect opposing graveyard decks. Shrike Force is a 1/3 with flying, double strike, and vigilance, so just with Doran out, this essentially attacks for 6 damage, and we can pretty easily enhance that even further. Then there's the Catapult Fodder transforming into Catapult Captain, which now lets us maybe sacrifice our creatures to make the opponent lose life equal to their toughness. So we can first attack to pick up the +X/+X from Doran, and then still sacrifice them afterwards. And then we've got Patrician, a flying lifelinker with a lot of toughness that can further drain the opponent end of turn. The green shell can provide card advantage whenever a high toughness creature enters on our side. And then a Shadrix Silverquill also has a lot of different modes where we have to target our opponent with one of them, often giving them extra +1 counters, which we don't really mind, while drawing extra cards. And then a 2/5 with flying and double strike also represents 10 damage with Doran out. And then Baitor Kin to All is also pretty easy to enable in this deck, where we can draw extra cards, untap our team, and eventually make the opponent lose half of their life rounded up. Then we get to our Assault Formation effects with a Namesake enchantment at 2. Then Huatli is a Planeswalker with that same ability, can also gain life equal to the greatest toughness among creatures we control. Bedrock Tortoise has the best power to toughness ratio among these, and can also protect our creatures during our turn. There's a Tapestry Warden, a 3/4 Vigilance, a Lumberknot, a 1/4, and then a Felothar, an 0/5, so also very powerful. And then we get to our interaction, where at 1 mana we have some instants, Swords to Plowshares and Fatal Push, can enable Revolt with our fetch lanes, and then a couple sweepers here with Slaughter the Strong, making each player keep up to 4 power worth of creatures, sacrificing the rest, so we can often keep every creature in play while the opponent might have to sacrifice multiples. And then the Battle of Bywater, very similar to Dusk, where we destroy creatures with power 3 or greater. Dawn can also maybe get some creatures back. Toxic Deluge can often be one-sided as well. And then we've got Fell the Mighty and Expel the Interlopers at 5, where we're often going to wipe the opponent's entire board while keeping our own. And then we've got some card advantage with Welcoming Vampire and Beast Whisper in creature form. Then we've got some enchantments. Black Market Connections can make a treasure as well, Phyrexian Arena. And then Smile at Death also has good synergy here, as it looks at our creature's power to return them from our graveyard to the battlefield. And finally, a Last March of the Ents is pretty pricey at 8 mana, but if we get to it, we can draw a ton of cards and put a whole bunch of creatures into play. And then it would be nice to be able to attack with all those creatures right away, and we can maybe do that thanks to our Crashing Drawbridge, the only actual defender in the deck, so this one's not going to be able to attack with Doran unless we also control something like an Assault Formation, but it can still block pretty well, and we can tap it to give all of our creatures haste until end of turn, so it can also represent a lot of damage out of nowhere. Can also give our creatures haste and Shroud with a Lightning Greaves. And then finally Tower Defense, a way to give all our creatures 5 additional toughness and reach until end of turn. So that also represents 5 additional damage for each creature at the very least, if we time it correctly. And then our mana base has plenty of basics to search up, couple channel lands for added utility, and then mostly a lot of mana fixing, shock lands and surveil lands in each color combination, as well as Access Tunnel, which we can maybe use to sneak a creature past opposing blockers, and it's a little bit cheaper to activate than a Rogue's Passage. And then we also have Urborg and Yavimaya to turn our lands into swamps or forests. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Toph, the first Metalbender. Our hand seems functional. Kick things off with a Pilgrim. And then turn 2, we can maybe double spell. Opponent also with the birds. Could also just go for Drawbridge, play tap Triome. So we're guaranteed Doran on the following turn. Right, Interlacer. They can also maybe sacrifice to draw and then bring back with Earthbending ability. Okay, so yeah, I think I stick to the plan here. Although I guess Turtle Dove does have its advantages. Although if the Pilgrim were to get removed, I could be in a bit of trouble. Because then I need to get my white mana in play before I can play Doran. But this sets up a pretty good attack. So there's Toph. Okay, now Earthbend onto the Interlacer. They also have the Indestructible Bridge, which is actually quite good against us, since that will give them an indestructible blocker no matter how large our creatures get. Okay, I think we still want to play Doran as opposed to pushing anything. And then at least this turn we'll have a good attack. And next turn Huatli threatens even more damage, as our creatures will deal damage equal to their toughness. So then this could have been an attack for 18. Now we also have to watch out for Inkmoth Nexus poisoning us to death. But that's generally more of a thing for the red-green Toph deck, the greatest Earthbender. And Lotus Cobra setting up a scary turn. They did tap the bridge, so they won't have that back as a indestructible blocker. But I guess they can animate the Interlacer and then chump and sacrifice to still draw. Well, they are targeting the Inkmoth. Nope. Tapping it for mana. 2 cards left in hand. They have access to at least 6 mana here. Make that 7 if they tapped off. And the Solemn's also a good blocker. Will also trigger Landfall. So, yeah, trying to outmuscle these creatures on the ground is going to be tough. And we don't have any evasion at the moment. So it's going to get tricky. They have 1 card left in hand. Now the Turtle Duck, I guess, can gain Trample, so that's maybe still a way to punch past some random blockers. And they will sack the Interlacer before they Earthbend it onto it. I guess they're planning to Earthbend onto the Solemn anyways. Okay. And find Catapult Fodder. Now that could be a way to still chuck a high toughness creature at the opponents to burn them out, basically. So, got a few options. If I go Catapult Fodder, I can give it haste. But I won't be able to give the Turtle Duck Trample. Still a decent attack. And then I can Fatal Push as well. Or maybe Tower Defense if that lines up better. So everyone can attack. Yeah, I guess Tower Defense doesn't do much at the moment since we don't deal damage equal to our toughness. So it's not gonna enhance the amount of damage we deal. But yeah, opponent is aggressively chumping at least. Question is whether I want to push the Divide Guide now or if we wait. Because if they enable Revolt for me, then I can maybe push Toph instead. So let's wait and see. Nantuko onto the Inkmoth Nexus. Yeah, probably want to stop that. Inkmoth returns. But now at least it did not trigger Landfall on the Nantuko yet. Play a land, make a 1/1. So the plan now might be to attack, and then use Tower Defense in conjunction with the Captain's ability to burn the opponent out. Titania is fine. Okay, so we've got a plan. So I want to Tower Defense, then attack, and then sacrifice. And then there's no need for Huatli. I guess this could also attack, but yeah, as long as I can sacrifice one of them, we're fine. Could let the opponent block. Turtle Duck also threatens Trample. But yeah, we'll just sacrifice our commander for 20 damage. Nice and easy. And there we go, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Raph and Mikey, a Gruul ramp deck. And we do have Dusk to Dawn, so that can maybe clean up. We are relying on the birds to make white mana initially. This one's borderline, but I'm willing to give it a try. Strict Proctor does not stop Raph and Mikey since it's an attack trigger. It does actually stop our Green Shell, one of the few enters a battlefield abilities in the deck. So we might want to wait on the Proctor. Twin Flame Tyrant goes by. And our opponent starts ramping. So you can expect more ramp next turn to set up their commander. And yeah, maybe next turn we can already play Doran and get an attack in for 5. Explore into Heirloom. And a land, so if they have another land, next turn they can play Raph and Mikey. Source to Plowshares, now an interesting twist. I can just keep that up to remove their commander. It's a little suspicious that we're not playing Doran, admittedly. But I think it's worth it. So will they go for it? It's going to be a Ravager Worm instead. So that can fight when it enters. And if they fight the birds, I don't really have a choice. I have to take this out, otherwise we lose our only white source. Alright, I guess we'll go for a Green Shell now. And then we'll take a pretty significant hit. At least our opponent is playing a wider range of creatures besides maybe something like an Emrakul. They hit Raphael, so attacking creatures have double strike. And they can give Raph and Mikey trample, so they actually get to draw twice with it. I do have a good block on Raphael. I guess we take 14. And a UFO the draw. So now I probably have to go for a Doran. So we can set up a decent block on Raph. And pass a turn. Suppose I could have just put the land in hand and then still cast Proctor afterwards. Titan of Industry. We could have maybe stopped with a Proctor. Can now maybe destroy one of our creatures. But the more important ones are safe. They do now also get a free attack. Or they don't lose Raph and Mikey. Putting in Primeval Titan. So I can double block Raph and Mikey, 05 and 04. Single block here, this gets +2/+2, so it doesn't die. Titan dies. And the UFO goes to 8 toughness, so we don't lose anything. But our opponent did get 2 extra lanes. Alright, so what's the plan now? Either Felithar or Huatli are a way to deal quite a bit of damage here. Or I can cast a Dusk, we lose the Green Shell, but our opponent loses their 2 creatures and can replay Raph next turn. Not hitting the Felithar line, so how would that look like? Play Felithar, can fetch a Plains. we would trigger Green Shell, and then if these 3 attack, these 2 would essentially attack for 8 plus 10 is 18, plus another 8, 26, plus the birds. So it is definitely a strong attack. Yeah, let's try it. Green Shell hits a land. Could actually just put it in hand here, since we haven't played land yet. So I can play Huatli and gain a bunch of life second main. Although maybe the bird's attack doesn't make sense, since they can block that one with the Titan. And then it would only get in for 24, so that wouldn't be lethal. So we can maybe force them to chump. Opponent takes it. Casting Dusk would destroy my board as well. So instead we can go Huatli, gain 10 life.
I shall wield this power for good.
And Proctor gives us another blocker that can also maybe delay and enters the battlefield ability, although I'm sure our opponent can just pay for it at this point. Opponent found an ancient copper dragon. They can give stuff trample. They could wait for me to block, but they're gonna target the dragon. Alright, so block here. This gets +2 up to 5, so it would still trade for the dragon at least. And then I imagine we go for the Titan, since they can replay Mikey on defense. They will get a whole lot of treasure. But yeah, if their hand's not good, they will still die on the way back. And there we have it. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Dawn and Leo, the blue-eyed Flicker deck. It's gonna be a hard one, but we're off to a decent start. And Slaughter could be a decent reset button as well. Their opponent surveils. Halfling is a little late. For now, I guess we can play the Fanatic. Opponent ramping with the Talisman. And they had the swords. Fanatic exiled, so wouldn't be escaping that one. Okay, gives us time to set up some more mana creatures. Need to get a second green source. Okay, so can play Doran, and the Warden will have to wait for another turn. Halfling doesn't have a great attack, so I may as well surveil and just attack for 4. So our opponent's got a doubling effect in play, but they're still missing something to actually flicker with Dawn and Leo, so we're probably going to see that now. Urza, that's a good one. Make a pair of Construct tokens. Although Slaughter the Strong could be a way to clean those up. And a Signet thanks to the Urza mana. So at least I don't have those tokens back to block now. So I'm less incentivized to Slaughter the Strong already. So we get to surveil, getting some green source. Don't need land. Alright, I guess we're going all out. Tapestry Warden can attack. This would get +1, so I guess the halfling still doesn't have a great attack. But the other two should be fine. So that's an attack for 18, so our opponent's forced to chump. Not with both, so if the halfling attacked, we still would have lost it. Although maybe letting them keep Urza with the extra mana is still sketchy here if they can ramp out something big. A Riddler's acceptable. Ephemerate on the Riddler to flicker it and keep it in play. But yeah, Slaughter the Strong can clean those up. Wall of Omens, on the other hand, is gonna stick around. So they still potentially have a counterspell up as well. But I think we still have to try this. I get to keep everything. Opponent can keep Urza and the wall. And then an all-out attack is looking good. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Uharis, blue-red spells. So, Honor Guard does not stop their commander, since it's an end-step trigger and not an enters the battlefield trigger. So this hand's not particularly exciting then. Okay, this I can try. Probably start with Temple Garden, Elvish Mystic. And then I can fetch Overgrown Tomb. Or we can just get a basic and cultivate for black and white. Hexing Squelcher I don't particularly mind. So sure, just get a forest. So next turn I could go Doran into a 1-mana UFO. Or maybe a Voice of Victory. Swarmyard's pretty nice with a Spider as your commander. Opponent does have a blue mana up here, so I'm thinking Wash Away is pretty likely. So then playing the Voice can make it so they won't be able to counter my commander next turn. So that's one option. Could also just go for Shadrix and get that down in the meantime. And then next turn I can go Voice into Doran, which is maybe better. Shadrix resolves. So then give them the counters. And I will probably draw a card for now. More flying creatures can help. Soul Guide we don't care about. Opponent's opting, so they are tapping out a blue mana. At least for now. Our opponent with the untapped Otawara. And they pass a turn. So yeah, definitely looks like a turn where I want to deploy the Voice first. Opponent had a memory lapse, as it turns out. I'll fetch in response, since I wouldn't mind redrawing it. And then play Doran. And attack. Once again can give the opponent +1 counters. And then maybe we want to start going wide to an extent. And this is a decent attack. Okay, let's see what they've got. Velothar further increases the damage from Silver Quill next turn. So that could just attack for lethal in and of itself, but opponent does have the pump spell to go on Uharis, so that represents a lot of damage as well. They also have a Swarm Yard to regenerate their Spider. And then block the Squelcher, I guess. They do get to shoot 5 damage, so they can take out Silver Quill now. Alright, so what's my plan? Definitely involves Velothar. So then Doran could attack for 10 damage here. And then I can still mostly empty out my hand. I guess with the Swarm Yard it doesn't make much sense since they can just block and regenerate. Alright, so we'll just play some more stuff out. Between Turtle Duck and UFO, I guess a Trample could be nice. Flying could also be relevant. Let's go with the Duck. Alright, opponent's gonna draw with a Lantern. We have blockers for days. Slice Doran. Plus another burn spell, presumably. Tarfire. Doran's easy enough to redeploy. Velothar is still in play. Okay, so let's say we block here so we don't risk losing the Patrician. Velothar can go on. I guess they could still have an instant to trigger Prowess. This has me taking 8, but gaining 4. Should be safe enough. Get to untap, and with Voice we don't need to worry about counter spells. So I can just replay Doran and smash. Alright, and that'll do it. Sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Prototype X8, so a blue-black graveyard deck. Our hand is functional. Could start with the Grazer, put in a Cemetery. And then next turn land our Elves. Opponent's got the Freebooter. So I can go Llanowar Elves plus maybe a Jailer. Even though it benefits from the discount from Doran, Jailer could also be very good in the matchup. As our opponent's playing a graveyard deck. Although are they casting a creature out of the graveyard? They sacrifice and conjure a duplicate onto the battlefield. So I don't think they actually care about the Jailer, which is just one of those random alchemy quirks. A replicating terror. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature. For each creature, conjure a duplicate into your graveyard. Probably want a Grazer gone since I need the elves to actually cast Doran. Even though the Grazer hits a bit harder. Freebooter chumps to power up Prototype, so they're not too far from casting it. And an old Drifter can draw 2. Tower defense is interesting, so if I cast it and attack, what happens? Do we just have lethal? Kinda looks like it. Alright, I'll take it. I guess they still have a mana up. So I can attack, and then in response to the Doran trigger, cast tower defense. Just to make sure they didn't remove Doran somehow before attacking. So that's an attack for 25. Alright, nice. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Raph and Mikey once again. We do have a reasonable start. Honor Guard could also stop some of the Enter the Battlefield triggers from their large curve toppers, and then Expel has a board wipe. So I'll give it a try. Can kick things off by getting Temple Garden, so we have double white for Expel. Turn 1 crop rotation. What are we getting? It's not like an Eldrazi Temple's gonna help them cast their commander. Maybe they have Ugin's Labyrinth and some expensive card, but nope, just a Surveil land. So not the best crop rotation I've ever seen. So Temple Garden into Pilgrim. Could go for a Catapult Fodder, or we can double spell, which maybe sets up Doran a bit better, since we would be attacking for 7 damage as opposed to 5. And Wayfarer's Bauble. Okay, so stick to the plan. A sweeper could still be somewhat effective, since it would likely deal with Honor Guard and Pilgrim. World Wagon does get around the Honor Guard, since it's not technically a creature. But now we do get to play Doran and Smash. And then the opponent's still unable to play Raph and Mikey next turn, so I don't need to keep any blockers back. Alright, so we get a free attack in if we'd like. And then Catapult Fodder maybe threatens to burn them out next turn. So yeah, don't mind an attack. So even if it's Raph and Mikey into Emrakul, we should be alright. Alright, there it is. And what are they cheating out? Platinum Angel. Fair enough. Well, good thing we have this Expel. Take my turn. And then cast Expel the Interlopers. And then we can say 3. And attack. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing black-green elves with a high perfect, which can blind onto our creatures. So something small like Birds of Paradise might get taken out. Although we can also blind on our high toughness creatures, which can stick around for a while. But yeah, the main problem is our opponent going wide with a bunch of elves and us not being able to get through. So maybe I need to find something a little bit different with a board wipe to clean up. Alright, Dusk to Dawn helps. So we'll give this a shot. Still doesn't necessarily clean up their smaller creatures. But we also have a Source to Plowshares. And get our tapped land out of the way. Don't mind putting -1 counters on the drawbridge, since this one is not gonna be attacking. Opponent heists our library. They probably won't find too many individually powerful cards. They all kinda rely on synergy with Doran to some extent. But they might find a ramp card. Metallic Mimic, naming Elf. Makes it more likely that their creatures will die to Dusk to Dawn, or now the Battle of Bywater is very similar. I'll start with the drawbridge. Can play the Ram next turn. Elvish Visionary draws a card. Alright, so this turn play Ram. And then I can either Surveil or still Source to Plowshares if needed. But since we have 2 answers to the High Perfect, I want to save the swords for a different creature. It's going to be a Nissa for starters. Alright, that one's still going to die to Dusk, Dawn or Battle. But can generate some value in the meantime. So I can fetch, probably need another green source, since we do have some double green cards. And I'll keep another land, I think. It's a close call. I may actually not need it, since Doran also gives us a discount. And then could play Doran now, haste attack. And then save the removal for next turn after they maybe play their commander. They don't have enough power to take any of my creatures out. And our opponent takes it. Anoint the drawbridge, okay. Play a Loam Speaker, that one survives. But yeah, opponent's still taking a beating. So, what are we thinking? Just play a Catapult Fodder and maybe a Jailer, keep up swords, seems decent. Opponent trumps. There's also an argument for shared routes, but now that we have the captain, we can also win the game without our commander. So I'm okay playing the Jailer. Because shared routes would give us more mana to maybe replay this if they find an answer. So Nissa up to 6 mana. They now also cannot play any removal spells that they might have heisted from my deck. High Perfects. Can put a counter on the captain itself, since that one's probably not attacking. And it's gonna take a while to blight this down. Alright, so no need to swords unless I want to swords like a metallic mimic or visionary here. But our opponent could still have removal up for Doran. So I'll just take it easy. And then start with a Battle of Bywater. And then we can attack. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing the Gitrog Ravenous ride. Our hands is reasonable, if the Scrapgorger lives, that is. Got Expel as a board wipe, some interaction, and some card advantage. Turn 1 Elvish Mystic. Alright, so won't be able to double spell push with connections necessarily. Utopia Sprawl, naming black. Into Imperiosaur. Okay, we found a black source. So now I can double spell. So they won't be able to play the Gitrog. And then Expel the Interlopers is looking pretty good. Although we would prefer to cast it before they can sacrifice their creatures. Take 5 of Imperiosaur. Green Shell's not bad either. And Silver Quill. 6/5 Trample Haste. I mean, just playing Doran would line up reasonably well. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting spot, but I don't think I want to expel just for one creature. So I think Doran still gets the nod. And then we can pass. I guess I could also exile the Fanatic before they Eternalize it, although if they spend their turn Eternalizing, then Expel looks pretty good. Imperiosaur attacks. Maybe they don't know how Doran works, or they're planning to wipe the board anyway. And Vorinclex. Alright, so I'll make sure to exile the Fanatic now. Probably could have done so in the combat step. So now what's the plan? Still make treasure, draw card. So I could expel, deal with Vorinclex, add Zealot to the board. Or I can just dump all my big things, and then expel can still kind of pinpoint Vorinclex at some point. Don't hate that idea either. Okay, and then Silver Quill can give them an extra +1 counter. And I will draw a card. In case I do cast a board wipe, I might want the extra resources. Alright, and that'll do it. So yeah, we got to see this Doran high toughness deck in action, and yeah, the deck does not mess around. If you can keep Doran in play, the deck hits incredibly hard, can still be weak to some go wide strategies, making a whole bunch of tokens, which can just chump your large creatures and eventually swarm you to death. And of course control decks that can cast a lot of board wipes to keep the board clear are going to make things tricky as well. But overall, I've been enjoying my time playing this deck. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.